Dr. Mestenhauser, we've talked about the history, we've talked a little bit about the context, but I'm wondering if you see, has the importance for international education changed?
Well, I would say yes and no to some extent too. And when I was writing this outline out here, I remembered that we have something like 35 position papers dealing with international education, and they have been one better than the next one. But the very best ones are the first ones and the last one, and both have Minnesota connections to it.
Yes, yes.
The first one was the so-called Morrill Report, that most people still consider to be the best statement.
Right.
And I take a little credit for it because President Morrill then set up us as a small task force. Besides myself, there was Bill Rogers and Charlie McLaughlin from the International Center and so on. And we wrote a position paper for him, what he should include in that statement. And the last one was published by, produced by the Nasulčák group. You know, they have changed their name now. I don't remember what it is now. The Association of Land-Grant Colleges and Universities. And that was written by Gene Allen.
Oh, okay,
Almost entirely, too, because they really understood, had a very deep understanding of that, too. So I would say, you know, that to some extent there is a lot of similarity between these two over 60 years, you know. So it obviously shows that somehow the importance has not changed, but I think what has changed is the context of it, you know, and I think I already mentioned some of the difficulties, you know, the foundations that initially were very friendly to it have just kind of dropped out, and in part they dropped out because they didn't really like what the faculty have done with the grants. You know, that the faculty were pushing for irrelevant subjects, you know, just favorite topics of their own instead of internationalization and so on. And government, of course, does produce a lot of grants, but the problem is that there is too many government agencies dealing with grants. You know, I was involved, my last involvement was with the development group, you know, that dealt mostly with AID out here. But there was something like 60 government agencies involved. And so we finally got that pared down to 40. But still, you know, it's a major problem because, you know, the development is often agricultural or economic or technological or something like that. So the typical diplomatic service cannot deal with that too. But the coordination of that is a problem. So we have a chaos in Washington, and that chaos gets reflected in the campuses as well, of course, too. And the individual clients of the different government agencies, like the farmers or the laborers and so on, you know, they took advantage of it. And the academics do as well, you know, the international relations people, you know, latch on to the Title VI and the Title IX. And they monopolize that. I actually used a few tricks on them too, you know, because each time I would apply for a grant, and then when I got turned down, which I knew I was going to do, to be, you know, then I requested for feedback. And they had to release all the comments that they got from other people, and they were, you know, totally irrelevant to my comment. You know, I almost always worked foreign students into my request, you know. And you can see the biases that came out about the foreign students. You know, foreign students teaching us, you know, a bunch of baloney, you know, for them. So that's how you learn how these academic biases work, and it makes you wonder how these government agencies select the people to comment on these grants and make recommendations out here too. So that's one of the difficulties I think that we have, is the unintegrated things, because we don't have a policy like the Europeans do, for example. There's always a Ministry of Education that regulates things too. But even then, ministries of education are usually focused mostly on primary and secondary education. And in my experience with with this, they have never understood higher education. They just kind of leave it on the side out here.
Right, right. Yeah.
So the changes, that have happened mostly is that there's a tremendous growth of different associations. Some of them, of course, existed for a long time, like IIE or CIEE and so on. And NAFSA came in 1948 and so on. But there are some new ones too, and they all compete for the same money, for the same attention.
Right. And
some of them are professional associations, some of them are academic societies and so on. So there is a proliferation of these and no integration out here. They have now combined to form some sort of a lobbying group. And that's a problem for international education as well, too, because when you become a lobbyist, you have an axe to grind. So you become a pressure group, and you are being dealt with as a pressure group. So I'm not sure that that is a good solution, but to some extent, when it comes to the immigration regulations that are so oppressive against foreign students, that's probably the only way that you can deal with that is by lobbying against them, too.
Right.
But it's a problem.
Yeah.
And the other problem, of course, is that you don't have any kind of a corresponding outcry from the institutions. The institutions have essentially surrendered their authority in international education to these agencies. And government agencies and foundations like this because they don't have to deal with, 100 institutions. And they deal with just a few associations and assume they cover higher education.
Yeah. I had one question. We talked a lot that when you started, a 60-year career, that the nature of the jobs, too, the positions have changed as the organizations have changed as well. For individuals that work as foreign student administrators, how has their capacity changed as well?
Well, it changed essentially the way that you wanted it changed. Because nobody knew what you were doing, so you had a kind of a free hand. And, I think I took full advantage of that, too. So I not only was a foreign student advisor, but I also created the Minnesota International Center.
Right, MIC, yeah.
And I dealt with the student government. And I supported student government to nationally, because there was a very active National Student Association until the CIA incidents broke out here. And that was very unfortunate, because at that time the student government was quite interested. They had international vice president and so on. I tried to break through to the Daily, and that School of Journalism was just, there was an iron curtain, paper curtain in front of the Daily,
Yes.
From that too. So I did not quite succeed, but you sort of develop your own ties and your own associations, and you also develop your own competence. I was taking a PhD at the time, and I started doing some readings in other disciplines too, and then just when I finished my PhD, I was invited to go to Hong Kong to do a study for the State Department. That was an eye-opener.
Yeah.
And then I was in Japan and Philippines and Hong Kong to negotiate for the opening of the Fulbright programs in these countries and so on. So then my Fulbright in the Philippines was to develop a study of leadership in the cross-cultural elements of it. We all kind of assume that American educated graduates are the agents of change, and that they come and become leaders the same way that we taught them.
Right.
And so I wanted to challenge that kind of an assumption. And I did. Unfortunately, my manuscript got confiscated by Marcos's henchmen when they took over out here, so I never did publish. And when things were finally able to be published, it was outdated, nobody wanted to touch it, and then my publisher died. So that was unfortunate, but I still have the original draft, and
really?
I still draw on it too.
Yeah.
And I think, as I may have mentioned to you, I was just very surprised because I also included a study of student governments too, and I did a special session at one of the Catholic institution on the Cebu Island called the Carlos University, and just what is it, recently, maybe about half a year ago, I had a letter from one of the student leaders out there thanking me for what I have done, that he has my notes from my lectures and that he had used them, and thanking me for his career, which was so successful, and it was due all to me, and thank you again. I was just absolutely flabbergasted that somebody after that many years told me what I have lectured about.
Wonderful. You know, for people that are starting out as foreign student advisors, do they have that same capacity as you see it, that same free hand? Or, as we had talked about too, there's sort of a division between sort of the research element and the practitioner elements. And I wonder if you could
Well, I think that you find a discrepancy there. You know, there will be many foreign student advisors who are academically oriented.
Right.
And I think I have written a couple of publications, you know, mostly published in Europe out here, which I call the dual functions of international educators, because they are both service providers, counselors, and educators. And I spelled the word "and," I guess, for them. So that was noticed, you know, quite well. I was quoted quite widely for that, and many people responded very positively.
Yeah.
But there are some people who simply look at it simply as a counselors.
Right.
And that's fine, you know, because many of them actually do go on to school for PhDs in counseling.
Right.
And the reason why I encourage that is because if you have one mentally ill foreign student who is suicidal, having a very highly skilled counseling person may save that life. And we have, in fact, done that many times. And the opposite would be if you allow that to happen and the suicide to happen, you got a problem of major proportions. Family, governments, everybody. Too. So no, I think that the oversupply of highly trained counselors is worth doing out here, you know, because they do face very complex situations. And I could tell you stories, you know, if they weren't subject to privacy information, I could publish a whole collection of short stories about some of the issues that happen, some of them encountering the educational system, some of them encountering relationships among foreign students, relationships with Americans and so on, relationships with families and governments and so on. So, and so many of them are tragic, many of them are very enlightening and very, very positive and you know, very inspiring.
Right, right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mestenhauser.
Okay.